Oscar Wilde's favourite architect was Edward Godwin. Now forgotten and uncelebrated, he could have been one of the greatest figures of the Victorian age. Dan Cruickshank finds out what went wrong.
Here, in wild and remote West Limerick, lies Godwin's forgotten but fantastic masterpiece, Dromore Castle. I've always longed to see this place. There are many more famous examples of the mid-19th century passion for recreating the look of the Middle Ages, but none more romantic and more impressive than this. Godwin built Dromore for the 3rd Earl of Limerick. The castle is a pure medieval fantasy, with its battlements and a tower in which any damsel would have been happy to pine. But the whole place was pretty impractical. When the Earl moved into his new home, he discovered his coach couldn't fit through this archway. Worse was still to come. Godwin had been warned about the notoriously wet Irish weather, but made only a half-hearted attempt to combat the damp problem by lining the stonework with brick. This was to have a disastrous effect on his ambitious plans for the interior. Work on a fine series of frescoes was begun, but soon abandoned because of water streaming down the walls. Godwin, who characteristically took a rather cavalier attitude to his building's practical imperfections, merely walked away from this problem, vowing later never to work in Ireland again. Because it was so impractical, the last inhabitants abandoned the castle in 1954. But a few haunting remains hint at just how splendid it once was. It's amazing how many wonderful details survive within this sad ruin. Up there, that fire surround, that was the drawing room. Staggeringly good. As a piece of Gothic revival architecture, Dromore was a pioneering success. But as a home to live in, it was something of a failure. Like his future patron Oscar Wilde, Godwin, for all his genius, certainly made mistakes. His career started promisingly enough when, in 1861, at the age of 28, he won a national competition to design Northampton Town Hall. This was the first opportunity for the young, unknown Godwin to demonstrate his abilities on a major scale, and he rose to the challenge magnificently. His Venetian Gothic design was inspired by the writings of John Ruskin, who argued that craftsmen and architects should collaborate fully to recapture the creative spirit of the Middle Ages. But the young, obsessive Godwin found this difficult to accept. He considered everything he did to be works of art and was not about to entrust his first major project to any old stonemason. Godwin insisted on designing everything, from these rather wonderful and eccentric finger plates and lock plates on the door here, to the fire surrounds, to these Gothic lamps, and of course, the furniture. These chairs in the council chamber are wonderful, if a little bit bizarre. I love their simple geometrical form, semicircular in shape, and the abstract decoration, these little discs here, way ahead of their time, really. Fantastic. Even so early in his career, Godwin displayed a truly outstanding and versatile talent. When the town hall was completed in 1864, it was universally acclaimed, even by Ruskin himself. But just as Godwin looked set to follow the conventional Victorian path to riches and respectability, he met the young actress Ellen Terry, who was to change the course of his life forever. They became entangled in a scandalous affair, despite Ellen being married. They eloped and lived openly together in blissful sin. But this was to have a drastic effect on Godwin's career. He failed to secure any further commissions from big public institutions, whose members, no doubt, were shocked by his unconventional lifestyle. Instead, Godwin was forced to turn his attention to smaller domestic projects and accept commissions from people prepared to judge him by his talents rather than by his morals. In 1872, Lord Cooper asked Godwin to design this quirky, romantic house in Nottinghamshire. The interior has obviously been much altered, and the wallpapers have long gone, but wonderful examples of Godwin's talents as an interior designer do still survive. Just look at this bold fire surround with this minimalist, almost ruthless chamfered cornice and this stepped keystone. Also, excellent etched glass showing the four winds. But this commission was not without its problems, and here Godwin's stubborn nature led to disputes with the client. Annoyed with Godwin for painting the woodwork rather than varnishing it, Lord Cooper refused to pay him. Meanwhile, the bailiffs were raiding Godwin's own home. His dire financial problems forced Ellen, who by then had had 2 illegitimate children with Godwin, back onto the stage to support their young family. Soon after, Ellen and Godwin's 6-year relationship collapsed. As Ellen later recalled, Godwin simply went away and shut the door after him. This unexplained abandonment of his children and of the woman who had helped him through such difficult times is disturbing. Godwin was clearly a deeply selfish and flawed character. It was after the separation from Ellen that Godwin began the most original phase of his career, designing a number of artist studios in Chelsea in the late 1870s. Tite Street at this time was a bohemian enclave, and now his clients were those on the very fringes of respectable Victorian society. Godwin's first Tite Street commission came from the painter Whistler, for whom he designed the strikingly modern-looking White House. This, sadly, was demolished in the 1960s. But the studio house he built for the artist Frank Miles is, thankfully, still standing. What exists today, however, is a toned-down version of Godwin's original and radical design, which was way ahead of its time, and so naturally got rejected by the cautious planning authorities. Next door, Godwin built another pioneering building, the Tower House, a precursor to the modern high-rise apartment block. For Victorian eyes, accustomed to strong dark colours and a profusion of bric-a-brac, Godwin's stark, light-filled studios must have seemed revolutionary. Godwin's avant-garde skills soon came to the attention of Tite Street's most brilliant resident, Oscar Wilde, who employed Godwin as his interior designer when he bought the lease of number 34. Now, sadly, the place has been divided into flats, and today one can only guess at the flamboyance of its original interiors. But one hidden example of Godwin's genius lies here, in the Midland Grand Hotel in London's St Pancras Station. These magnificent murals were for years attributed to the artist Andrew Benjamin Donaldson, but recent research has revealed that they are in fact the work of Godwin. These are the designs for the frescoes that he planned for the ill-fated interiors of Dromore Castle in Ireland. This astonishing oversight is a poignant testimony to his neglect. Godwin should have been as famous as Sir George Gilbert Scott, the eminent architect of this building, or even William Morris. Instead, he lies buried in an unmarked grave, a fatally flawed genius who failed to live up to his early promise.